Welcome to the Pipeline Podcast. Today is July 24th, and today we're going to be covering a surprise executive order by Trump. So we're going to check this out. It's kind of a good one. That's all we're going over today. It's just some breaking news. I think this one is actually important to cover. There's a lot of shit news and there's a lot of shit stories in the news right now, but this is one that actually matters. So let's check it out. And by the way, there will be no videos this weekend. I will be on vacation. We see here, Executive Order, July 24th, 2025, ending crime and disorder on America's streets. So here's what's going to happen tomorrow. Everyone's going to wake up. No one's going to have read this full executive order, except for you. You're welcome. And you're going to see a bunch of fake news that are like, Trump just gave himself the power to scoop up anyone that can't afford a house or something like that. And I guarantee that's not true. I guarantee you're going to see a lot of fake news about this executive order, a lot of left-leaning sources exaggerating it. The whole point of this channel, at least one of the points, this is not a conspiracy. We love that, but this is a current event, and this is something that's probably going to matter going forward, at least in the rest of Trump's term. We're going to give our hot takes. We're going to play a little bit of devil's advocate, try to see if there's actually some good in this executive order, try to see the best case scenario of how it turns out. And then when you wake up tomorrow and you see all the fake news articles about it, or perhaps you're watching this later on in the week or whatever, and you've already seen a lot of articles bashing this executive order, follow along with us on the episode because this is the exact source. If you click on any article that talks about this executive order, but it does not source this executive order, you cannot be sure if the article is accurate or not. And so follow along with us. We'll tell you exactly what it says and what we think is going to happen. So again, the title, Ending Crime and Disorder on America's Streets, by authority and the president or whatever. This is hereby ordered. Section 1, Purpose and Policy. Endemic vagrancy, disorderly behavior, sudden confrontations, and violent attacks have made our cities unsafe. So this is an exaggeration. If the executive order is talking about what I think it's talking about, it's really in major cities where we see a lot of like homeless people. So it's not like every city. The number of individuals living on the streets in the US on a single night during last year, the previous administration, was 274,000, the highest ever recorded. The overwhelming majority of these individuals are addicted to drugs, have mental health conditions, or have a mental health condition, or both. So this part, as far as I understand it, is true. A lot of the people that are homeless are not trying to bash on anyone, but dysfunctional. They have addiction issues or a severe mental health thing going on where they just can't function normally in society. And maybe they just can't afford the right treatment, or there isn't facilities to take care of them. We've seen some states, or maybe cities specifically like LA, try to deal with this, and the crisis there hasn't really got any better. You got to give this a chance, right? Because whatever we've been doing to combat homelessness in the country so far has not been working. The numbers keep going up. So you got to you really do have to give this a chance. At least it's something different. I don't even know what it's going to do yet. But I'm going to tell you, nearly 2/3 of homeless individuals report having regularly used hard drugs like meth, cocaine, opioids in their lifetime. An equally large share of homeless individuals reported suffering from mental health conditions. So it says about 2/3 have used drugs, and about 2/3 have a mental health condition. But I feel like everyone in the US has used some kind of drug. Maybe not meth, but also meth, you think of just painkillers, cocaine. Pretty popular, but I don't think everyone's used it. And then opioids, opioids and meth. Those are things that get prescribed to you by your doctor a lot of the time. So a lot of Americans, not just homeless people, have used these. And then also it says an equal share, so about 2/3 have a mental health condition. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's the truth for the rest of the US as well. Everyone has some kind of mental health condition. We see that a lot. It's very common nowadays. So basically what I'm saying is these two statistics here, they might not just relate to only homeless individuals. They might relate to just everybody. The federal government and the states have spent tens of billions of dollars on failed programs that address homelessness, but not its root causes, leaving other citizens vulnerable to public safety threats. This is a statement that I do agree with. Like I was saying earlier, obviously the way that our country has been combating homelessness has not worked. So we should not be doing the same thing. We should do something different. And whether you like what's going to happen or not, this is something different. So it's better than doing the same thing. Shifting homeless individuals into long-term institutional settings for humane treatment through the appropriate use of civil commitment will restore public order. So yeah, as long as it's done like non-violently and civilly, and these people are actually being taken cared for in these long-term institutions, aren't just like Ponzi schemes or whatever, or they're not just like super corrupt, like bottomless pits that just eat up federal funding. As long as they're actually like properly staffed and they work properly, yes, absolutely. We need to go back to that. We used to have institutions in this country, but we don't really have that anymore. Surrendering our cities and citizens to disorder and fear is neither compassionate to the homeless nor other citizens. So I almost agree with this whole statement, but I really can't name a single city that has surrendered to fear of homeless people. That's not a real thing. But it is true that the homelessness epidemic in the country does affect like regular everyday citizens, and it definitely doesn't make things better. And you've seen extreme examples in like LA where like kids are trying to walk to like the playground and there's like people like using needles and stuff just openly. That doesn't help anyone. And like I said, that is an extreme example. Section 2, restoring civil commitment. The Attorney General, in consultation with the Secretary of Health and Human Services, shall take appropriate action to, in appropriate cases, the reversal of federal and state judicial precedents and the termination of consent decrees that impede the United States policy of encouraging civil commitment of individuals with mental illness who pose a risk to themselves or the public or are living on the streets and cannot care for themselves in appropriate facilities for appropriate periods of time, and provide assistance to the state and local governments through technical guidance, grants, or other legally available means for the identification, adoption, and implementation of maximally flexible civil commitment, institutional treatment, and step-down treatment standards that allow for the appropriate commitment and treatment of individuals with mental illness who pose a danger to others or are living on the streets and cannot care for themselves. So it looks like the executive order is giving the power to the Attorney General and Secretary of Health and Human Services to basically use guidance, grants, or other legally available means to like identify, adopt, and implement like a way to help these people who can't care for themselves. And it does define it here. Individuals with mental illness who pose a risk to themselves or the public, or they're living on the streets and cannot care for themselves. That's how they're going to restore civil commitment. Let's continue. See if there's more of a plan laid out. Fighting vagrancy on America's streets, the Attorney General, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, and the Secretary of Transportation shall take immediate steps to assess their discretionary grant programs and determine whether priority for those grants may be given to the guarantees in states and municipalities that actively meet the below criteria to the maximum extent permitted by law. So I think it's saying if the states do these things, like enforce prohibitions on open drug use, enforce prohibitions on urban camping and loitering, and urban squatting, if the states do all three of these things, they can get this federal funding. This is written very similar to the Big Beautiful Bill, so I am a little familiar with this kind of stuff. So it looks like, say a state wants some of these grants that come from this executive order to help with their homeless problem. If they can enforce prohibitions on squatting, loitering, urban camping, and illicit open drug use, they will be eligible to get these grants. And it looks like Trump's cabinet kind of gets to pick what these grants are for, and what they're going to be like, what they're going to do, what the money will be allocated for. And if the states want to get it, they have to enforce these things. So it's like an incentive program, basically. And there is more than just these three things here. So number 4, enforce and where necessary, adopt standards that address individuals who are a danger to themselves or others and suffer from serious mental illness or substance use, who are living on the streets and can't care for themselves, through assisted outpatient treatment or by moving them into treatment centers or other appropriate facilities via common commitment or other available means. So it's saying if there's someone that's like mentally ill or uses drugs, they can't care for themselves, living on the streets, you have to move them to an outpatient treatment center. And that's not a concentration camp, just for people that are saying that. I bet we're going to see stories tomorrow that are like, people will read this and say, oh, Trump's going to move all the homeless to concentration camps. Outpatient treatment is very different than a concentration camp. And then also like other appropriate facilities, maybe like a mental ward or whatever, or like an inpatient treatment center. To get these grants, again, you have to meet the criteria below. Criteria number 5, implement and comply with registration and notification obligations of the Sex Offender Registry and Notification Act, particularly in the case of registered sex offenders with no fixed address. Okay, so this is saying if you have a sex offender in your state that's homeless, you need to keep tabs on it. That's up to the states now. That's a win right there. And then right here, the Attorney General shall evaluate if any of the homeless individuals arrested are sexually dangerous persons. They shall also take necessary steps to ensure the availability of funds to support encampment removal efforts. So the Secretary General is, it looks like, in charge of making sure that funds get used to get rid of encampment removal. So that would be something like Skid Row, basically. Again, that's like the most extreme example of it. Any like homeless encampment. They shall also address federal resources to determine whether they may be directed toward ensuring, to the extent permitted by law, that detainees with serious mental illness are not released into the public because of lack of forensic bed capacity at appropriate local, state, and federal jails or hospitals. So this is a good thing because we do see this a lot where it's like someone needs a shelter, but there's no room for them. Go to a major city and just like pretend it's like late at night and you're like trying to find a shelter. Like go try to actually find one. Like it can actually be very hard, especially if like you're new to like homelessness, you don't know what's going on. So this is just guaranteeing that anyone that needs shelter is going to get it. But it also kind of says like if you have a serious mental illness, you might not get released from that shelter to the public. It also says if you need a shelter, you're going to get it. There's going to be funds for it. So we'll have to see how this goes, because it also says like they could be in the appropriate place, hospital or jail. So we'll have to see what happens with that one. The Attorney General shall enhance requirements that prisons and residential reentry centers that are under the authority of the Attorney General or receive funding from the Attorney General require in-custody housing release plans and, to the maximum extent practicable, require individuals to comply. So it's like a release plan. This is a good thing. So you read both of these together and it makes some more sense. So any like seriously mentally illness person that's not able to get released into the public will at least have a release plan. And it sounds like if the individual complies with the plan, they'll be released. But like, let's all be honest here. There are some people that probably shouldn't be released. There are some people that like are dangerous to themselves and others that just, they don't really get cared for. The way it kind of works right now is if you want to seek shelter, you kind of need to comply with the shelter's rules. But this is kind of changing that a little bit. They might force you to go into a shelter and say, hey, do you want to get out? You need to like follow like this plan. Maybe it's like a 12-step program or something like that. Section 4, redirecting federal resources toward effective methods of addressing homelessness. So this might be about the funding. Let's check it out. The Secretary of Health and Human Services shall take appropriate action to ensure that discretionary grants issued by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration for substance use disorder prevention, treatment, and recovery fund evidence-based programs and do not fund programs that fail to achieve adequate outcomes, including so-called harm reduction or safe consumption, efforts that only facilitate illegal drug use and its attendant harm. So the way I understand this is like the Secretary of Health and Human Services is not going to give out funds for like exchange your used needles for new needles here, like stuff like that. Secretary of Health and Human Services shall provide technical assistance to assisted outpatient treatment programs focused on shifting such individuals off the streets and public programs and into private housing and support networks. Ensure that federal funds For federally qualified health centers and certified community behavioral health clinics, reduce rather than promote homelessness by supporting to the maximum extent permitted by law comprehensive services for individuals with serious mental illness and substance use disorder. The Attorney General shall prioritize available funding to support the expansion of drug courts and mental health courts for individuals for such diversion serves public safety. So it looks like they're going to like fund drug courts and mental health courts, so maybe that things get streamlined more easily. Maybe I'm understanding this wrong. Apparently there are drug courts. Like if you have like a drug charge, it's a different kind of court. Same with mental health courts. I don't know much about that. We have Section 5, increasing accountability and safety in America's homelessness programs. So it's like all those secretaries stated above shall take appropriate actions to increase accountability of their provisions of grants awarded for homelessness assistance and transitional living programs. These actions shall include ending support for housing first policies that deprioritize accountability and fail to promote treatment. Love that. That's a win. The actions shall include recovery and self-sufficiency, increasing competition among grantees through broadening the applicant pool and holding grantees to higher standards of effectiveness in reducing homelessness and increasing public safety. So I think that last part just says like states that follow this executive order better will get more funding than other states. So it's like competitive. That is something new. I'm not saying it's a good idea or a bad idea. I do kind of think it is a good idea. It leads to states. It leaves it up to the states. Like, do you want to follow this executive order and get funding? This is how like the federal government wants to deal with the homelessness crisis, but it's not going to force the states to. So if they want to keep doing things the way that the states have been doing it, which isn't working, so that would be stupid. But anyway, if they want to do that, they can do that. They're just not going to get the federal funding from this. So it's up to them. That's some states' rights for you. Next up, we have Secretary of Housing and Urban Development shall take steps to require recipients of federal housing and homelessness assistance to increase requirements that persons participating in the recipient's program who suffer from substance use disorder or severe mental illness, use substance abuse treatment, or mental health services as a condition of participation. So this is just saying the people, like these homeless people, need to be in either like a substance use disorder program or like a serious mental illness treatment program, which makes sense to me. It basically means they need to be in treatment. With respect to recipients of federal housing and homelessness assistance that operate drug injection sites or safe consumption sites, knowingly distribute drug paraphernalia or permit the use of distribution of illicit drugs on property under their control. Okay, so this is just like for places that do this, like safe consumption sites, the Attorney General is going to review them, see if they're in violation of federal law. They're also going to review if the recipients are in violation of the terms of the programs. And if they are, they'll freeze their assistance. So it's basically saying no safe consumption sites or drug injection sites. They should also take appropriate measure. The Secretary of Housing and Urban Development shall take appropriate measures and revise regulations as necessary to allow federally funded programs to exclusively house women and children and to stop sex offenders who receive homelessness assistance through such programs from being housed with unrelated children. So if you're a sex offender, you're not going to get housed with women and children or unrelated children. Makes sense to me. Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, in consultation with the Attorney General and Secretary of Health and Human Services, shall, as appropriate to the extent permitted by law, allow or require the recipients of federal funding for homelessness assistance to collect health-related information that they can use as necessary to the effect and efficient operation of the funding program from all persons to whom such assistance is provided. And you're probably going to see fake news about this, like Trump is going to collect data on all the homeless people. But in reality, what's probably happening is they're going to use that data to see if the treatments are working. And if they're not working, change it up. If they are working, they'll probably push it into other areas. I'm sure that's what's going on here. But people are going to take this the wrong way. And require those funding recipients to share data with law enforcement in circumstances permitted by law to use the collected health data to provide appropriate medical care to individuals with mental health diagnosis or to connect individuals to public health resources. Which seems like a good thing, even though people might say, oh, that's like a violation of people's privacy. But it's like, if you're homeless and do have like a mental health issue that's really bad that keeps you homeless, or you have like a drug addiction, you need to get better. And obviously what we've been doing isn't working. And so as long as this like is done with good intentions, it should only benefit these homeless people that the executive order is trying to help. But you're going to see news stories that spin that the other way. And time will tell. But you heard it here first. So far, I think this executive order is going to be great for the country. And I do think it will help a lot of people, whether they like it or not. So let's see where we were. Oh, Section 6, General Provisions. Nothing in this order shall be construed to impair or otherwise affect the authority granted by law to an executive department or agency or head thereof, or the functions of the director of the Office of Management and Budget relating to budgetary, administrative or legislative proposals. This order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law and subject to the availability of appropriations. This order is not intended to create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law or in equity by any party against the United States, its departments, agencies, and entities, its officers, employees, or agents, or any other person. This is like lawyer stuff right here. The cost for publication of this order shall be borne by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. Okay, there it is. So I'm wondering if that says, if this is talking about the Department of Housing and Urban Development gets to allocate funds for this executive order. So I guess it doesn't really say the amount of like grants that would be given out. So we'll have to follow up with that. But anyway, if you're clicking on this video, you've probably heard about this executive order already. And it looks like it's not really going to give. So if you're homeless and you're not trying to like get better or get out of it, if you're not trying to like find a shelter and like find a job and all that, and also you have like a substance use disorder or a severe mental illness that makes it so you like stay homeless, if you're in that group, which is I think they said it's about 2/3 of homeless people, it looks like they really might force you into a shelter, and they're going to give you a plan to get you out of there, and you have to work with the plan. Also, it looks like if the states follow this executive order, they comply with it, like enforce prohibitions on open drug use, urban camping, loitering, urban squatting. If the states do that, they'll get grants. They'll get extra money to like work on this executive order, which is something we've seen before in the Big Beautiful Bill. It's basically an incentive program. And so the states that comply with it will get more federal funding, which is what the states want. And at the end of the day, don't think about how your state's government is going to respond to this. Think about you and how the federal funding like actually would help your state, no matter how you lean politically. Like this executive order, the states really get to choose if they want to follow it or not. So if they follow it to the best they can, but also don't start any concentration camps and you still get the federal funding. Like what I'm trying to say is like a super liberal state like California could actually follow this program like just fine. And I think it would benefit the state, specifically the bigger cities like LA. I don't see any reason that they couldn't. I don't see how it could potentially make the state worse, especially for the people that live in the state, not just the government. But I think that might be what Trump is kind of looking for. Some governors to say, all right, Trump, like we'll do it your way. We'll try it. We'll see what happens. And to actually like try it fully. So we'll have to see what happens there. If you have any other hot takes or things I missed on this executive order, leave a comment. If you like stuff like this, definitely follow the channel. Give it a subscribe to the channel, because this is the stuff we go over. This one right here, this I really do think is going to end up being quite an important executive order. It might do more good than bad at the end of the day. And like I've already said in the video, the homelessness crisis in the country has not been getting better. And so just to see a change of pace is already a good start, whether you like this or not. And at the end of the day, like this is my opinion, but there are people that are on the streets that do need help. and are not going to openly seek that help out. And I think that's kind of the whole point of this executive order. And that's all we got tonight. So have a great night.